Hey guys, it's Michelle here. I hope you're doing well. This is a requested video. I know this topic is very difficult. A lot of people will just switch off because they don't want to think about the autopsies of Shanann and the girls. I mentioned the autopsies in a recent video and someone requested that I go through the explanation of what the autopsies mean. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it across two videos. So in this video, this is Shanann's autopsy. And then in the next video, I'll do Bella and Cece. An autopsy is absolutely vital in any criminal investigation, because if a prosecution is trying to prove that a homicide has taken place, they've got to prove that the person didn't die of natural causes or any other cause. So if anybody watched the recent Derek Chauvin trial, you know, the defence made a big thing about George Floyd's heart disease, for example, and drug use, and really kind of use that to try to sway the jury. So doing an autopsy as soon as possible after death or after discovery is really, really important. In this case, the autopsies all took place on the 17th of August. So the bodies were recovered from survey on the 16th of August, and the autopsies took place just a day after. So the first page of Shanann's autopsy, so this is the toxicology report. What we've got is positive findings, and then on the next page there's a list of all the drugs and the substances that were tested. So she does have a positive ethanol result, which is alcohol, as taken by spleen blood. That is quite a high ethanol count. In a living person, anything under 50 milligrams per deciliter, you're looking at mild intoxication. Somebody with a blood alcohol of 50 would be probably, okay to drive. Obviously depending on the laws in your own country. 128 is moderate intoxication, so that would be in life, that would be somebody who would be impaired in driving. They would be coherent, they wouldn't be completely paralytic drunk, but it would be a significant amount of alcohol. But blood alcohol in the living can be deceptive, actually. That women, because they've got a smaller frame, smaller muscle structures, tend to have a higher blood alcohol count than men, having drunk, the same amount of alcohol. Also, if you haven't eaten for a while, then your blood alcohol will rise very quickly. But after death, this kind of reading can be really deceptive, because where a body has started to decompose, as Shanann's did, as we'll see shortly, just the normal kind of sugars in the blood and in the body, combined with microbes like fungi and some bacteria, can produce ethanol. The blood alcohol in this case doesn't necessarily mean that she was intoxicated at the time of her death. She could have had a glass of wine, or even 2 glasses of wine, on an empty stomach and had a reasonably high blood alcohol. But it's probably, in this case, probably just as likely that this reading is as a result of decomposition. So don't read anything into that. I mean, I've heard a lot of misinformation that Shanann was rolling drunk and she killed the girls because she was rolling drunk. She didn't know what she was doing. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. There's no evidence for that at all. So she was tested for a whole range of drugs, amphetamines and other things, loads of them actually, and they were all negative because they're not in the positive findings column. I will mention just the oxy, because there is some question about whether Chris gave her oxy on the night. No evidence of that because it was a negative finding. So what happens at an autopsy is that at the time of the autopsy, the person doing the autopsy will take notes. So they'll take notes of everything that they can see on the external of the body. So they'll take weights, measurements, look for bruising, look for abrasions, look for the coloration of the skin, and just really document it all. So these are the pathologist's handwritten notes. I'm glad it's all typed up because I can read some of this, but not all of it. So we're going to go through the typed up notes, which are done obviously afterwards. The forensic pathologist who undertook all three autopsies was someone called Michael A. Burson, who was both an MD and a PhD. So he's a double doctor. All right. So she was actually pronounced dead when she was taken out of the ground. So August the 16th at approximately 12:05 a.m. And then her autopsy took place a few hours later at 10:30 a.m. All right, so we'll go through all of this. I'm not a medical professional. I don't work in the medical field, but I do understand some of the medical terminology, and the stuff I don't understand, I've looked up, right? So I have a basic knowledge. The first thing that you'll see on an autopsy report is the diagnosis. So in terms of a criminal case, this is going to be absolutely vital. In a case that goes to trial, obviously this one didn't, but the pathologist would be recording it in detail as it might, right? So they want a diagnosis as to whether this is caused by a criminal event such as strangulation or shooting or stabbing, or there's evidence of a natural death, you know, like a heart attack or something like that, right? You've got to rule all that out. The aim of an autopsy is ruling out things just as it is ruling in things. The first thing to note is asphyxiation. That's the likely cause of death, okay, due to manual strangulation. And as we'll see when we go through the detailed kind of internal and external examination, the main thing is the bruising of the anterior, which is at the front. Anterior means front. Strap muscles, which are the muscles at the front of your neck. So there's considerable bruising, more on the right side than on the left side. There's some decomposition, which we'd expect. And she was pregnant. She was in her second trimester. She was 15 weeks pregnant. And she'd experienced coffin birth. So after death, as all the muscles and tissues relax, quite often you find that a fetus will expel him or herself. She did experience coffin birth. Nico was born in the grave. We've already mentioned the tox report. Based on the diagnostics, the opinion of Michael A. Burson is, based on the history provided in the autopsy findings, the cause of death is asphyxiation due to manual strangulation by another individual. The manner of death is homicide. What happens at an autopsy is the body is examined first of all as it was found. So that's with any clothing on. Photographs are taken with the clothing on. So there's a documented, track of evidence before the pathologist actually starts the autopsy. After that, the clothes will be removed. Photographs will be taken again of the body and any kind of relevant findings on the exterior of the body. So we'll do the external and then the internal. So the autopsy commenced at 10:30. The body is that of a well-developed, well-nourished, although decomposing Caucasian female whose appearance is generally consistent with a reported age of 34 years. The body measures approximately 67 inches long and weighs 144 pounds. Body exhibits mild to moderate decomposition, consisting of generalised discoloration, bloating and skin slippage. This is important if we want to establish an approximate time of death. Now, in this autopsy, the pathologist hasn't given us a time of death. We can take some information from the stages at which the body was decomposing. So we'd expect some decomposition, having been in a grave for 2 days. She was buried the early morning of the 13th, and she was discovered, she just turned the 16th. So she'd been in the ground more than 2 days. There would have been microbes in there that would have acted on breaking down the body. Bloating is one of the stages after death, and skin slippage, so the skin starts to come away. That's perfectly normal when someone has been buried. There's a lot of talk in the community about rigor mortis. So rigor mortis starts to occur within a few hours of death, and it releases. And it can take several days for it to release completely from the body, so the body goes back to a floppy state. Rigor mortis isn't a good indication of an exact time of death. You can't say just because certain muscles have released, it's X number of hours. It doesn't work like that. It depends on a lot of factors, and environmental factors, but also the state that the body was in. So you'll go into rigor faster, you'll go into rigor slower if you're well fed, like at the time of your death. It's to do with the amount of energy that's in your muscles, the ATP, adenosine triphosphate, that's in your body at the time of death. Don't read too much into it, but we do know she was dead at least 36 hours, probably 2 days. The fact that all her major muscle groups have released, that's consistent with what we know about the case. Livor mortis is the discoloration after death, because the heart stopped, the blood can't pump, so it kind of pools in certain areas. It says that livor mortis was not readily apparent due to post-mortem artifact. What that means is that there's conditions that took place that might confuse an investigation. So that could possibly, in this case, be due to the amount of decomposition that had started to take place. But there was an identifiable area of blanching. Now, blanching is where there's been pressure. So the a pathologist here has found on the right side of the abdomen, extending along the groin to the right thigh. This is likely consistent with an area of pressure based on the body position at the time of discovery. So the position she was in has just caused that pressure on her body. There's no issues with her head, so they'd be looking carefully for signs of crime. So there's none here. The nose is midline and it does not grate on palpation. The pathologist will have actually wiggled her nose to check that it wasn't broken, because if somebody's died a violent death, they've been punched or kicked in the head or something, then a broken nose would be a sign of that. She hadn't experienced anything like that. So where we get the injuries is on her neck. So let's explain this a little bit. There's no kind of lumps and bumps or inflammation or anything like that. That's just what that means, adenopathy. But there's a line of variable size purple-black circular defects, which I would imagine they would be kind of where fingers are dug into her, circular like the tips of the fingers. So that's under the chin, along the jawline, up the left aspect of the face. So if you can think of somebody maybe gripping you under the chin and along the left side of your face. Now remember, she had bruising to her right side of her muscles in her neck. I think she would have been lying on her left side with a hand gripping her on the left but pressing down on the right. That's consistent with the bruising pattern, in my mind anyway. No remarkable things to say about her chest or her abdomen or her genitalia other than Nico being born. So then the body would be opened, like a long incision from the chest down the abdomen, and then the bodily organs are all examined. They're looking for signs of natural death, but also signs of a violent death. You know, they want to rule things out as well as investigate and rule things in. So there's no abnormal fluids or accumulations or anything like that. So if somebody's kind of beaten to death and they're like on the torso, they might have signs of ruptures of certain organs, fluid build-up and things like that. So we don't see that. And the organs are dry, and that's a result of her being in the ground. Her heart is fine. No atherosclerosis noted. Atherosclerosis is a disease that's caused by cholesterol buildup in the insides of arteries. You know, when you get a clogged up arteries that can result in a heart attack. Well, that's atherosclerosis. There's also no blood clots. So it's basically saying she didn't have heart disease. So she didn't die of heart disease. Now, this is important. What we see here is normal sized lungs, but this here means she had collapsed lungs. Collapsed lungs occur for various reasons. Newborn babies, like preterm babies, can get collapsed lungs because the breathing apparatus isn't well developed. You can have collapsed lungs after certain diseases or surgery or after a violent death. If somebody, for example, has sat on you or squished their knees into your chest while they're strangling you, that is going to collapse your lungs. You're squeezing the air out of somebody whilst you're strangling them. So as they try to raise up the diaphragm, they try to breathe, they can't because they're basically their body's being squashed. So she had collapsed lungs, but no other abnormalities. The spleen, the liver were fine. The gastrointestinal tract, so her digestive system was fine. Pancreas was fine. Urinary system, okay. Kidneys. So there's no damage to her internal organs. Oh, one thing I will say about her liver, actually, she had a gallstone, but that would have caused some pain. If it wasn't already, it would have started to cause pain. That wasn't a cause of death. Just something that was found. The important thing is the neck that we've already mentioned. So traumatic injury as previously described. But what is interesting is the hyoid bone and the thyroid are intact. So often if somebody's strangled from the front, like somebody's pressed down on the front, squeezing the front of you on your neck, then your hyoid bone is going to break. It's only a little bone. But I think the major pressure was down on her right side. She was lying on her left, the pressure bruising on the right, and the finger marks on the left, like holding her head and then squeezing down. So that's why I think the hyoid bone wasn't broken. Spine was fine. She did have indication of hardware. So C6, that's the cervical vertebra 6 in the neck. So she did have surgery on her neck. That's okay. No hemorrhaging. No blood loss to the brain, no swelling in the brain. So basically, she wasn't beaten to death. Consistent with asphyxiation by manual strangulation, which is exactly as Chris described. So that is the autopsy of Shanann. Hopefully that's kind of helped you, if you've got to the end of this, you know, it's helped you kind of put some context to maybe some of the misinformation that's out there about Shanann being drunk or about Chris didn't really do it, or whatever is said, right? And it's just giving you some information and just explained the autopsy report. Let me know what you think. If there's overwhelming dismay that I'm doing this and an overwhelming clamours to please don't do Bella and Cece, then I won't, but I am planning to. So unless there's a large outcry of people saying no, then I will do it. It won't be my next video. I'll leave a space between them, but I will come back to that. Hope you're doing well. I've been Michelle, and I'll speak to you in the next video.